I think they're a terrorist state, and I think they do terrorism far worse.
They had a right to defend themselves.
So don't tell me that Israel is more moral. I would argue they are more immoral. So I can't read the minds of Hamas, and I'm opposed to Hamas.
Dr. Phil just got obliterated by Cenk Uygur for lying about Palestine, and the clash was live and unfiltered. One man kept recycling tired lines like a press release, while the other dropped brutal facts that couldn't be dodged. The result? A viral showdown that left people wondering if Dr. Phil was debating or just auditioning as Israel's PR manager.
Infinite power over the Palestinians. They control their lives completely and utterly. They could kill them at any moment, and they do. And the things that you described, they don't do that anymore.
To retaliate, do you think that when Hamas did what they did on October 7th, that they could predict what was going to happen?
Dr. Phil and Cenk Uygur straight went to war. Cenk tore into the stage with 57 years of occupation, checkpoints, and bodies piling up by the tens of thousands. October 7th was the spark, but what followed was a firestorm that exposed who really holds the power. Dr. Phil clung to calm lines, but Cenk ripped through them, dragging the buried truths of money, media, and blood into the open.
Palestinians have been offered peace accords and all different kinds of opportunities to change this occupation circumstance.
No doubt Dr. Phil came in wearing the mask of a calm mediator, trying to appear balanced, but Cenk wasn't having it at all. He came armed with numbers, history, and raw passion.
There is no moral equivalent to what happened on October 7th.
Cenk went straight for the jugular. October event was horror, but what followed was slaughter. Entire neighborhoods leveled, 60,000 dead, nearly 19,000 of them children. He called it domination, not defense. Dr. Phil tried to pull it back to one day, but Cenk shoved 57 years of occupation into the spotlight and left no room to hide.
45 times also trivializes what happened to Gaza, which is utter slaughter and destruction. Things about us, and we got every right to occupy these people and keep them as our slaves for 57 long, brutal years, and I'll do it for 500 more years because I'm superior to them.
He didn't deny the tragedy. He didn't minimize the horror. Instead, he asked the uncomfortable question, what came after? Israel didn't just defend itself, it unleashed a storm. By July 30th, 2025, more than 63,000 people had been killed in Gaza, including over 18,500 children. 8 out of every 10 Palestinian deaths were civilians. For Cenk, this wasn't self-defense. It was punishment on a scale so massive that the word proportional lost all meaning.
But what Israel doesn't understand is that they are Goliath. For all of Jewish history, they have been David. Misunderstanding the current situation, they're no longer David.
But today, Cenk said, Israel is no longer David. They are Goliath, armed with unmatched military power and backed by the might of the United States. The roles have flipped, and pretending otherwise is dangerous. Dr. Phil tried to interrupt with his classic, yeah, but deflections, hoping to steer the conversation back to October 7th. But the analogy landed too hard.
So no one would tolerate being occupied at all, let alone for 57 years. And the analogy I often use is Texas. So if somebody came and occupied Texas, do you think Texas might fight back? Do you think the citizens might fight back? And especially if you took away any opportunity to do it in a legitimate way, do you think maybe an insurgency would rise that others would call terrorism, right?
Cenk pressed on. If Texas were occupied for 57 years, stripped of rights, humiliated at checkpoints, and offered no way out, do you really think Texans would just sit back quietly? Of course not. That single line cut deeper than statistics. It forced people to think about occupation not as a distant concept, but as a human reaction anyone could understand.
It's so hard not to get frustrated. I'm trying to make peace here, but
this was the moment the debate crossed into something bigger. It wasn't just about October 7th anymore. It was about the decades that led to it. It was about 5.5 million Palestinians living under occupation for more than half a century. Dr. Phil wanted to make it about one day. Cenk made it about 57 years. That shift in framing is what turned this podcast into a viral showdown. Dr. Phil leaned on the tragedy of Israelis killed in a single day. Cenk responded with the tragedy of Palestinians killed by the tens of thousands over decades. And doesn't that reveal the core problem? Whose suffering gets remembered and whose gets erased?
They had a right to defend themselves.
By the end of this exchange, it was clear why viewers said Dr. Phil got obliterated. He tried to hold the moral high ground by repeating a single moment of horror. But Cenk's voice carried the weight of history, the numbers no one wanted to confront, and the uncomfortable truth that the powerful had become the oppressor. This wasn't balance, it was exposure, and people watching could feel it.
I actually totally disagree. I think what Israel has done since is far, far worse, and it's empirical. So they've killed 62,000 now.
Now here's where Cenk really started swinging with the kind of numbers that don't just sting, they crush. He didn't bother with fancy language or long speeches. He just pulled out the cold, brutal math of this war. By July 30th, 2025, more than 63,000 people had been killed in the Gaza war. Let that land for a second. Out of those, 62,122 were Palestinians and 1,983 were Israelis. That's not just a gap, that's a canyon.
How we got here. So 57 years, so then Hamas does something terrible in return, okay? And then Israel goes, oh, you want to see terrible? How long do you want me to live under the thumb of a different people?
Cenk's point was crystal clear. When you've killed 60 times more civilians than your enemy, you don't get to keep waving the banner of morality. You've lost that right. And then comes the question that made everyone shift in their seats. Which side actually looks like the terrorist state here? And then came the number that stopped everyone cold. 18,592 children dead in Gaza by July 2025, according to the Palestinian Ministry of Health. Let that sit. Nearly 19,000 kids. Gone. That's not just numbers. That's entire neighborhoods of sons and daughters, brothers and sisters.
Look, whenever you have an occupation, what it does is it breeds radicalism. Because you don't have any real power, any moderate is seen like a collaborator.
And that's when you realize something bigger is happening here. The war isn't just being fought in Gaza with bombs and bullets. It's being fought in living rooms and news feeds over who gets to frame the narrative. If all people ever see is Hamas's brutality, but never Israel's, then the story isn't complete. It's propaganda. And Cenk ripped that curtain wide open.
Misunderstanding the current situation, they're no longer David. They're Goliath, plus they've got even bigger Goliath behind them. And they're beating up on these folks when they gotta let them go.
First came the David versus Goliath analogy. That one hit hard because it flipped Israel's own story on its head. Suddenly, they weren't the underdog anymore. They were the giant with all the armor, all the weapons, and all the backing. And people felt the truth in that.
They've now killed 60 times the number of civilians. So how could killing 60 times the number of civilians be more morally correct than killing one time?
Next were the cold numbers. Over 62,000 Palestinians dead, most of them civilians, 18,500 of them children. Against that, October 7th's 1,200 victims, as horrific as it was, looked like the spark compared to the firestorm Israel unleashed. That math was undeniable.
They could kill them at any moment, and they do. And the things that you described, they don't do that anymore at all. They're using an AI program called Where's Daddy? They have no idea if it's the right guy, but they wait till he gets home so that they kill his family with him.
And if that wasn't enough, Cenk dropped the AI bomb program revelation, literally. The idea of a system nicknamed Where's Daddy, waiting for a suspect to go home just to wipe out his entire family. It was chilling, it was disgusting, and it shattered any illusion of precision warfare.
It's hard to negotiate with people who are oriented to wipe you off the face of the earth. And from
Nonsense.
the river to the sea, you can spin that any way you want.
By then, Dr. Phil was running on fumes. His defenses boiled down to cliches and recycled talking points, while Cenk's words cut sharper and sharper. That's why the clip went everywhere. Because people are sick of polished media spin. They want the raw, uncomfortable truth, even if it's ugly, especially if it's ugly.
And remember, they're the ones who started it by occupying them in the first place. There's not a single Texan that would ever tolerate what Israel has done to the Palestinians.
And the way Cenk closed it all out sealed the deal. He didn't end with statistics. He didn't end with anger. He ended with a question that left the internet buzzing. If Gaza was Texas, what would you do? That question flipped the script completely. It made it personal. It made it impossible to dismiss. And for millions watching, it turned Dr. Phil's debate into something much bigger. A reminder that the fight isn't just about land. It's about truth, justice, and whether we're willing to look the facts in the face.